Is Paul McCartney's Höfner bass the original? Yeah, it's one of the originals. I had two, but one got stolen, and we still don't know where it is.
Now, a global search has begun for one of the most iconic instruments in music, really over the last 100 years or possibly even ever. This is the bass guitar used by Paul McCartney in some of his earliest Beatles performances. Let's hear more from our reporter, Helena Wilkinson.
Love, love me do, you know I love you.
Love Me Do, one of the Beatles' early tracks, recorded with Paul McCartney's first Höfner guitar. He bought it when he was a teenager from a shop in Hamburg in 1961. But in 1969, it disappeared, presumed stolen. This is one of the last official sightings of the instrument. Since then, rumours have swirled about where it might be.
Go back to square one. There comes our recording studio. Who's going to look after all this equipment? Because the only thing is, it is like 10,000 quid.
While recording the Let It Be album at Abbey Road, someone snuck in and stole several of the Beatles' guitars, including Paul's first Höfner.
Yeah, and it got nicked or stolen during the Get Back / Let It Be sessions in 1969.
The bass was last used during the filming of the Let It Be movie in 1969. Unfortunately, the bass was stolen during the filming and has never been located.
During the shooting of the Let It Be documentary, the 61 bass was stolen from a closet at Abbey Road Studios. This accounts for why we see Paul using the 61 early in the film, but then only the 63 for the rest of the film and for the famous rooftop performance filmed on January 30th, 1969.
There's always been a rumor that this bass guitar got stolen at Twickenham during the Let It Be session, sometimes into the first week of the film recording. Probably this was assumed because in the Let It Be documentary, Paul swaps it with his main Höfner bass, and for the rest of the film it cannot be seen. But recently people pointed it out that in the Peter Jackson Get Back documentary, the Dear Höfner Cavern Club can be seen at Savile Row. This is the last time it can be seen on camera. It was on the 24th January 1969.
My theory is, and it's kind of half fantasy, but it's that you go to some German castle way in the hills of Bavaria and you'll have dinner. And then the host will say, "Come, let me show you something." And you go up into this little room, and there's my bass over his mantelpiece. It could be just a fantasy.
Well, the Beatles' unauthorized biographer Philip Norman came up with another legend. According to a Liverpool taxi driver, which gave him this information, the bass was taken to Ottawa, Canada.
This is one of the originals. I had a couple, and there was one stolen.
One thing that still needs to be confirmed is the date. All we know, it was stolen from a closet at Abbey Road Studios, where George Harrison's 1963 Gretsch Tennessean and its second 12-strings 1965 Rickenbacker 360 Fireglue were also stolen in April 1969. But we don't know if Paul's Höfner was stolen on the same occasion.
How many Höfner basses do you own, and is the one you have now the original Beatle bass?
Yeah, I have one main one that I use and a backup. But in the 60s, a couple of them got nicked, as we say in England. Nicked, which is stolen. It just means stolen, N-I-C-K.
In this clip, Paul says it was stolen in the 60s, 1969 presumably. This means it happened during the Abbey Road session.
Or is it?
Recently there's been an update on the whole story, but if I wasn't you, I would take it with a pinch of salt. From a media campaign meant to trace Paul's bass, a sound engineer who worked for Wings, named Ian Horn, claimed to be responsible for the loss. He said, In 1972, Paul McCartney was preparing for his first UK and European tour with Wings, and the band was recording their second album, Red Road Speedway. We had rented a truck to move the gear, guitars and amplifiers, to various recording studios and rehearsal spaces across London. We were often crisscrossing London to rehearse or record at Morgan Studios in Willesden Green, the ICA in the Mall, Manticore Studios in Fulham, Island Studios in Notting Hill, and Abbey Road in St John's Wood. One night, after a long day, we got to Notting Hill, where Trevor lived, and decided to park the truck up there for the night. We knew there was a huge padlock on the back door, but when I got up in the morning and saw the van with a broken padlock lying on the road, I knew it was bad news. I looked inside, and the bass, along with another guitar and 2 Vox AC30 amps, had gone. Mr. Horn added, "We instantly suspected people living in and around Ladbroke Grove were responsible. 1 or 2 people living close by knew that we worked for Paul, so they would have known that there was a chance that the kit in the back of the truck belonged to Paul. We went from door to door asking people if they'd seen anything or if they knew anything, but nobody said a word." Mr. Horn reported the theft at Notting Hill police station at noon that day. While Sir Paul McCartney may not recall the theft, Mr. Horn remembers it as if it was yesterday. He said, "I knew it was Paul's original bass that had been stolen, and I knew what it meant to him. Trevor and I did all we could to find it, but it was gone. Eventually, we had to go to Paul's house and tell him that the gear had been stolen from the back of the truck. He told us not to worry, and we kept our jobs. He is a good man, Paul. I worked for him for 6 years after the bass went missing, but I've carried the guilt all my life." Brothers-in-law Ian Horn and roadie manager Trevor Jones continued to work for Paul in Wings, and on the album Band on the Run, they even contributed backing vocals on some tracks. Even though there are very few if none information about these people, possibly if this story will develop in the future, we will be able to better judge its authenticity. Anyway, a few years ago there was a suspicious eBay advert selling an Höfner bass for $250,000. And a Redditor pointed out that in the home video of Paul McCartney's Find My Way, the Höfner 500/1 violin bass is just behind him, and it is not the same you received from Höfner in 2006. Well, if you have more mysteries to add to this subject, leave them in the comments. I'm off.
You know, I always like hearing what people are interested in, and it's nice. I like that people are even bothered to write in to join in the conversations. I think that's a cool thing.